HR's role is to ensure the organization has the talent and capabilities to win.
Welcome to Your Work Friends, where we're breaking down the now and next of work so you get ahead. I'm Francesca Ranieri.
And I'm Mel Platt.
Mel, we just had a conversation with JP Elliott.
We did. Yeah, we love JP over here at Your Work Friends. He is a friend of the pod, and we are a friend of his, the Future of HR podcast. And Francesca and I, week after week, we're talking about the now and next of work. We're very interested in what work is going to look like, what it looks like, where it's going. JP is very focused on setting up HR organizations, which are the base of every successful place, right? To be prepared for that as well, like helping develop that next generation of HR leaders. And we thought this was prime time for us to connect and talk about what's happening with work.
Yeah, absolutely. If you don't know, JP Elliott hosts the Future of HR podcast, where he's talking to executives and CHROs from folks like Amazon, American Express, Verizon. He also runs the Next Gen HR Accelerator, which, to Mel's very good point, builds those next gen HR skills of the folks that are running HR. If you're wanting to learn from somebody that is talking with people, learning from people, upskilling people in HR all day, every day, you want to talk to JP. We're stoked to have him on this week. We were also very stoked to talk to him on his podcast. We're doing a little pod swap this week, friends. So go over to the Future of HR and you can hear Mel and I talk about our latest research on reciprocal work, the boss-employee relationship, and talking about the strategy work that we do.
Yeah. With that, folks, here's our friend JP. Francesca and I love a good backstory over here. You've been inside the seat as a practitioner, and now from the outside, you're a host of the Future of HR podcast. You're an advisor to a number of organizations. What's your story? Like, what caused you to launch the Future of HR?
Yeah, for me, it's always been about impact. And it was about 2022 when I started getting into podcasts, which was super late in the game. They've been around for a while. My wife and I started listening to podcasts, and I was like, let me check out these HR podcasts. Because first we're like listening to Smart Lists and other ones that are more popular and probably better than mine, of course. But I listened to the HR podcast and I was like, there's a gap in the market. I don't think we really are really like leading the story. I feel like we had an opportunity to do two things. One, how amazing it would be if I was 25 years old and early in my career, I could listen to some of these amazing people that I've worked with and learned from throughout my years, whether it's a Mark Efron, CHROs like Holly Tyson or whoever. And I've had a really good network. And so I was like, gosh, what if I did a podcast? And it was really about what I wanted to hear when I was 25 years old and starting my career. And that was it. And so I bought a microphone, same microphone I'm talking to you right now on. It arrived through Amazon. My wife said, what is this? And why'd you buy a microphone? And I said, oh, that's my accountability partner. I'm starting a podcast called The Future of HR. And I've owned thefutureofhr.com probably for 15, 20 years and never done anything with it. And so it just became the time to do it. And when I committed to launching it, I said, you guys know, there's something called pod fade. A lot of people quit after a while because actually podcasting is actually harder than it looks to produce a good podcast. And I said, I'm going to do 52 podcasts, one a week, and to see if this gets traction. And it did. It took off. And I think it took off because the mission is sincere. And truthfully, there wasn't a lot of podcasts for more Fortune 500 companies that had been there that could bring that practitioner point of view, but also had the same mission of trying to really bring this back to helping people's careers. And so now we've had over 250,000 downloads, 150 podcasts. So this week will be 151. Yeah, and it's what I do every weekend. I don't know, it's weird, but I do podcasting like you guys do. So I love it. Yeah. And that allowed me to leave a chief people officer in private equity, a job that I didn't love. That really just felt wasn't the best use of my skills long-term and where I wanted to be. And I left and I built something called the Next Gen HR Accelerator program. And that is a 4-week leadership development program helping HR business partners, mostly directors and senior managers, be more business focused. We teach how to read a P&L, how to be strategic, how to influence executives, and how to take business strategy to HR strategy. And I sold 22 seats for a pilot to Verizon, Cardinal Health, Prudential, AbbVie. And I said, if I could do that, maybe I just do my own thing and not go get a job. And that's what I've done since kind of May of 2024. So it's been a crazy journey.
That's so good. One, we're inspired by what you've done and what you continue to do, and love your podcast. So thank you for building it. What would surprise people most about how you actually think about HR? What's your X factor, your differentiator there?
It's interesting because I think we bring a lot of HR, we bring a lot of who we are to what we do, right? It's an interesting craft. It's not finance where everyone knows what a good CFO looks like. We know we expect GAAP and non-GAAP, and there's rules around accounting. There's not really rules for HR. It's more about art and science. And so for me, what I think has become more and more clear as I try to find my voice over the last 18 months or so is that I'm really focused on the business. And I think HR is a business driver. And I bring a much more business focused perspective. That doesn't mean you leave the people side. It's just we should think about this like a CEO would think about it. We should approach the business like a business person would with a people mindset. And so I really believe the best HR leaders are business leaders with HR expertise. And that's what I really try to bring and teach. What do I talk about online or my newsletter, et cetera? But like when I bring that, that's me in some ways. And I think that frankly is what makes HR leaders really successful in the role, is having that point of view.
I want to talk about the state of HR. Right now, especially on LinkedIn, I see a lot of dogging of HR. They are not business centric. They don't understand the business. They need a full rebrand. When you see posts like that dog HR, they're too soft, they don't understand the business. What's your reaction to that?
I think it's the William Gibson quote of the future is already here. It's just not evenly distributed. And that's for HR as well. And I'll give you a story around this. When I was at a global tech company as a director, the CHRO there, she'd never been a CHRO before. And she said, hey, I want to have the best executive coach. And she handed me a book. And it was Dave Ulrich. And it was HR Human Resources Champions. And she said, I want Dave Ulrich to be my coach. And so I reached out to Dave Ulrich and got him to be her coach. At the time, there wasn't Uber. So I said, I'm picking Dave Ulrich up from the airport because I want to get to know him and have a conversation with him. Obviously, he's a luminary in the field. Literally, I'm driving to his airport, the hotel from the airport, probably a 15-minute drive. I'm like, so Dave, you wrote this book 10 years ago and nothing's really changed. Like, why isn't HR more strategic and business focused? And Dave said to me, JP, that's a great question, but it's really 20% are really strategic and business focused. 20% are never going to be strategic and business focused. And then everyone in the middle is trying to figure it out. And I'm like, so you basically just gave me the overall print. Gosh, JP. I was like, all right, what are you explaining to me here? This makes a lot of sense. So you're seeing 20% is good, strategic, 20% not. And the rest of the middle are kind of like the show me state, Missouri, figure it out. And I think he's right. The point of this is, Francesca, your question is that there are organizations that are not business focused. They are only thinking about people. They're still smiles and files and doing things that is much more personnel than what we do today, which is strategic HR and having an impact on the business and the biggest companies. So I think that disparity is why this doesn't go away. I think if you look at the organizations today, we have three kind of big groups as I see it. I didn't know this until I started the podcast. You have Fortune 500 companies that typically are more sophisticated and mature and are doing more cool work, the HR work that we think is driving the business. Then you have more tech startup companies, that for many of them, and they call it people operations. And these folks are just under-resourced. They don't have as many resources. They're working with founders. They have very different challenges than if you are at Verizon, than if you were an astronomer. If you have a 300-person company and a founder-driven, HR is just done differently there.
It's like one person.
It's one person or two people, or maybe it gets 10 people, right?
Yeah.
And so how strategic can you be if you have to make sure that people get paid and that onboarding happens on time and there's compliance issues. There's all kinds of issues that things have to be done properly. Mm-hmm. And then you have private equity, which is across the board. They're in the middle. Depending on the size, that private equity can lean more towards people operations or more strategic HR. So I think that is why most people, when they start to rip on HR, is that we get lumped together. And the reality is not every HR person is the same. And every HR organization is the same. That's my take on it.
Yeah.
Not every organization supports strategic HR.
Absolutely.
There's
not
that
every
layer
leadership.
too. Yeah.
I want to take it from the Fortune 5 angle because I agree with you. I see a lot of people, they're the chief people officer for XYZ company and they're a team of one, maybe a team of two versus any team that we're at like Nike or Deloitte or any of these other companies that I've worked for. Your HR team can easily be in the hundreds. What do you think isn't working about strategic HR right now?
For me, what we have opportunities to continue to do is we've got to get the transactional work off people's plates in a way that is done properly that still has a good employee experience. And I call this kind of execution plus, because when I talk to a lot of the CHROs, you have to execute flawlessly. We have to get paid. You have to make sure that things are happening. The trains have to run on time. If you're not doing that as an HR leader, you're in trouble because your credibility is going to be gone. You're not going to be able to do the plus. So that's why I call it execution plus. And I see a lot of organizations going through right now, many organizations are going through this, trying to transform and continue to level up to be more strategic, but they still are mired down the transactional work, or people are hanging on to the transactional work because they felt value in it. They felt like they were delivering some value by doing some of that transactional work, helping people to answer questions about benefits or leave of absence when actually a chatbot could do that just as good or better or faster. So organizations are really trying to move that way, but that's the biggest challenge is that. And then second, it's mindset. It's the leaders in HR. Are we preparing to see our roles differently, operate differently, and show up differently with our leaders?
I have a theory about this. I want to get your thoughts.
Yeah.
I think HR needs to split into two different organizations because I feel like you have this compliance angle of HR that is very much about protecting the organization, protecting the employee. And then you have the plus side of the organization, which is about enabling and driving the business. And those two things sometimes can be conflicting, and they definitely take different mindsets. They sure as hell take different skill sets. And they're both incredibly needed, to your very good point. And I feel, can't we just throw the compliance side over to legal and really focus on the plus side so we can truly enable the business, so we can truly be strategic? I think there's still strategic work to be done on the compliance side, but I feel like these are two separate organizations that have two different remits, that have two different skill sets, and they will continue to as we get into AGI. So what are your thoughts on that, out of curiosity? Am I wrong?
What if you're wrong? Actually, Ram Shriram had that exact point of view in an HBR article, probably, I'm going to guess 11 years ago.
No, haven't read it. Should probably read it. Sorry about that.
Really Google it, because it was a big thing for a moment, because that was what he was saying, split HR. Mm-hmm. And of course, that was a moment where everyone got upset about it. Hey, we can't split HR. I do think it's actually happening. I just think they're not splitting it, but the organizations I've worked with are some Fortune 20 companies are working really hard to do that in a way with technology, with just the right people skills and strategies to get that compliance piece off people's plates and really elevate HR business partners to where they actually have no transactional work. And that's some of the work I'm doing with helping companies to do custom HR capability training, because what's happening is, hey, 20, 30% of my job was transactional. And I used to feel really valued for getting those calls and helping a business leader or any employee with some questions or whatever it happens to be. And now that work goes away and I've got 20 or 30% more of my time. What do I do with that time? Because now the focus is not thinking about an individual employee and helping them solve their individual need. It's, are you doing strategic workforce planning? Are you doing organizational design? Are you ensuring you have the critical roles and the bench for the future? What does that look like to be a real strategic business partner? And so I think that's the big transition that some organizations are really trying to do. They've got the scale and scope to outsource the compliance work and the technology. And so you see some people I think are making some good progress there, but it's still a mindset shift for the HR leaders. That's the hardest part.
Yeah. Sounds like a pretty big capability shift too.
I think so too. I think it's massive because this is what's hard about HR is that we need a lot of different skill sets to be successful. It's not as easy as it looks to be a strategic HR leader. You have to have some consulting experience. You have to have some executive coaching. You have to have different things. Something I call value creators, really 4 different areas that I'm really focusing on. But we've got a lot of work to do in that area. But it's part of that transition from personnel to HR to whatever we end up calling ourselves, which I'm not a big fan of changing the name all the time, but I'm sure that's happening. It's chief CHRO is now coming out of vogue. It's chief people officer. We love to change the names, but that doesn't change the work we do. So we'll see.
Speaking of change, right? If we're to build a future HR function from scratch today, how would you make it different? What do you visualize as the perfect setup?
That's a great question. It's a hard one, right? Because I think you got to start with the business. So the business model always have to start with the business model. Whether you need to do the Ulrich three-legged stool of HR business partners, centers of excellence, and then shared services, which 80% of the companies are still in that model, remains to be seen. What I would do though, because I think you match up to the business, is I would be thinking about being AI first. And I think the problem we're having today is that we're bolting AI on top of things. And so it can help you write an email faster. Maybe it's going to review some resumes, right? But we're not doing our entire talent acquisition process with AI in the middle. And so if you start to design AI processes from scratch and your HR team from AI and think about all the transactional work we just talked about, how can you have systems in AI that would actually do that versus people, or now their AI is obviously human, is still connected in the loop. But how do you use that technology is one area I would go. Second piece is the transactional work. I would try to outsource all of that as much as possible and figure out what that would look like. And I think organizations that start today that are smaller have an advantage because there's better tech. They can do a better job of outsourcing different pieces of it. You may have a pretty expensive tech stack at the end of it, and it may be a little bit disjointed. But I think trying to start with get rid of the transactional work, leverage AI better, and then on the people piece, I would be bringing in like liberal arts degrees. I'm looking for people who have MBAs, but also have done like a lot of experiences. I don't want just specialists who've only done one area of HR. I want people who are a little bit more generalists, who are more flexible. And I would really think about that talent across the team a little bit more differently. But that's my organization that I would want to build. I don't know if it fit the business or not.
What are those core teams that you see? What is a future function or teams that are within HR that we're not maybe leveraging enough today that you think we need to lean into more? If we're starting to take away some of the administrative pieces, if we're starting to lean into AI more, what becomes really critical to support the business?
The hard part is always like seeing the future from today, because it really changes your vantage point, right? It's so hard to see these roles that will emerge with AI. And I do think roles will emerge we have never thought of before. What I do believe will start to happen is you're going to have HR teams hiring people who are AI first and AI capable, who know how to build agents, who understand how to do GPTs, who understand can help the other folks on the HR team to translate and actually kind of wire AI capabilities into the workflow to build new capabilities and new products and new things that will help managers, help leaders be more effective, et cetera. So I think you'll start to see that. So we need that AI capability. It's a combination of someone who's probably an AI engineer, someone who's maybe some HR work, maybe there's an IO site component to that. I could be totally wrong. It could be a totally different background that I've not thought of. Some process component, kind of unicorns, but I think that'll start to become a job over the next 5 years that people will start to move into. I'm seeing some companies doing that now where they've got teams, they have some AI champions, but the reality is no one's an AI expert. It's too new. And you could be an AI expert tomorrow if you just spent the next 6 months to a year just going deep on it. And so I think some organizations will do that. Some people will start to figure that out. I still think talent management will still matter. I still think having a very strategic kind of HR consulting and strategic mindset around that will be really important. I think people analytics will be important. I'm always been a big fan of people analytics. I think it's underutilized. But then HR business partners will also be hugely important and maybe even more important. We already demand so much of them, and I think that's not going to go down. I think expectations for them will continue to rise. So they're going to have to be like HR business partners on steroids, have new capabilities, do, like we just talked about, a lot more than they're even doing today on the strategic front.
Who's doing this really well? Like, you work with a lot of organizations, as you mentioned, the Fortune 20. You're in there, you're seeing things in your own program. You're likely hearing like who's on the cutting edge of thinking about this differently. Who do you think's leading in this space and moving in the right direction?
Yeah, I think this one's pretty widely known. Moderna, I think, is one of the first AI first companies. It's been widely reported that Tracy Franklin became the CHRO, and then they gave her IT. So she has IT and HR, which I think has been a really big, that's a test case. We're going to find out. I think something just happened pretty similar at Service. Neither are clients, by the way, but I've got friends in both companies. And Moderna, I think, is really interesting. I know Molly Nogler pretty well there. They've built the capability across the company to build GPTs. And the number of GPTs that have been built across the company, I'm not sure it's public, but it's a lot. It's a lot more than most of us have ever built. So people are building GPTs for everything across HR and using that to supercharge their work. And I think that kind of culture of innovation where people are then feeling the opportunity to go create something for their specific need is where AI can really be innovative and exciting. And that's where I see the next 5 years, people building their own tools to do things that they need that matches their business case and what they do on a day-to-day basis to add more value and be faster. I think that'll start to happen more. Other organizations, I won't say the name, but they have built out a 50-person AI champion team. They're all working across the organization to learn. They're investing in the development of that team. And so they're really saying, hey, you're on the forefront of thinking about use cases and how we start to build this out. IBM is also on the forefront of this. Salesforce has talked about this. They've got agents. There's a lot of that stuff happening. But frankly, most organizations are not doing that much. They put a chatbot in, and they're just now starting to maybe use that chatbot. And people are just starting to figure out, I can really help me to supercharge my productivity, but I haven't figured out how to transform TA or other areas. We'll see.
We are AI optimists over here as well, like just thinking about the power of possibility and how that helps us be more strategic and support the business. But then you're also hearing some of those headlines, right? When you're thinking about new role creation in HR, like some of the problems that are popping up. We had a guest on a year ago, Dwenna Blomstrom, who talks about the concept of human debt with new technology and thinking about strategically with new technology, what new problems might be created if you're not thoughtful in how you're building these things. So what advice would you give to a CHRO who's considering implementing AI and how to evaluate things so that you're being strategic, but you're also making sure you're not creating new long-term issues that might pop up down the road? One example of that, right, the class action lawsuit coming up for Workday. So what advice would you give to a CHRO trying to lead in that space, but also navigating some of the new issues that might pop up as a result?
It's a really great question. I think it's more than just the CHRO's challenge.
Yeah.
It's the CEO's challenge, the board's challenge of like, how do you think about AI and use it responsibly and ethically? From an HR perspective, though, as we start to implement this, we should be at the forefront with the CEO and the team, the full C-suite team, not IT leading. This is fundamentally AI is work redesign. It's task redesign. It will change organizational structures and power potentially over time because it can really empower you to have information across the organization you haven't had before. So I think the unintended consequences of AI, if an organization wants to move really fast on this, is it will probably break down more silos and actually probably shake up the power structure. And there's a really great article where they took AI and they put it on to looking at systems across and data across an organization that was business data, so like supply chain, sales, marketing. Initially, it was like they were trying to figure out a supply chain problem. So they just gave the data to supply chain. Then they said, well, actually, let's give data to marketing. Let's put the revenue data in there, et cetera. And the solutions it was coming up with and basically the gaps it was finding was really across the organization. And so what happened was like no one really knew who owned and who should make the decision because it wasn't supply chain anymore. It wasn't marketing's decision. The insights were hitting all the way up to a CEO and breaking down some of that org structure. We're going to start to see AI getting out of people's sandbox. And I think there'll be a lot of, hey, this is my data, my protection. That's probably one of the things that will slow us down. From an ethical standpoint and legal standpoint, I'm not a legal expert. I think you've got to be really thoughtful. I think all of the good, sound industrial organizational psychology of principles of adverse impact and job analysis, all that stuff still applies. Efficacy, validity, you should be able to get in that sandbox and be able to understand that. But I think when you think about generative AI, the hallucinations are a feature, not a bug. And so we're really talking about like LLMs and other types of things that are a little bit more structured. But to use generative AI for some of the stuff, you're going to get, I think, bias and some things you don't want out of that. Because that's really what it's designed for when you get into the details of it.
I want to go a little philosophical for a second. And you might be asking, Francesca, why are you asking me this now? But I'm genuinely curious your answer, which is, what is HR in the next 3 years? What is it? What is it going to be?
Mic drop open. Everyone's, I don't know. That's a big question, Francesca. I go back to this. We anticipate a lot of change in the world. The world changes a lot. People change slower and have changed slower than we would expect. The world is changing very quickly, but human nature and people don't change.
Yeah, fair.
So fundamentally, I see HR's role, which is very different than finance, marketing, supply chain. We all know what we can expect and what they're supposed to deliver. What HR has to deliver is harder. It's more philosophical. So I would define this, and I learned this from Lucien Alzari, who is former CHRO at Prudential. He said this, that HR's role is to ensure the organization has the talent and capabilities to win. And I thought it is the most brilliant and smartest way to talk about HR. That's our job, ensure we have the talent and capabilities to win. How do we do that is the hard part. That's where this idea of the art and science and who you are as an HR leader and how we show up is really what makes the job so hard and why we see high turnover, because you would approach it differently than I would approach it. And it starts to become not just, are we using the same tools? We might use critical roles and define that the same way, or talent acquisition or talent management, whatever that stuff is the same. It's how we would approach the business, how we frame it, how we then get people behind the mission of what we're doing, right? And how we can get that support to drive things from behind the scenes, because we're never actually in front. And so I think for HR leaders and what HR is, we are there to unlock that human potential into actual capital and true value and innovation that shareholders and everyone can feel and experience in terms of monetization. So we have careers and we have jobs that can pay our bills and send our kids to college and all those things. But it's how we do that is very challenging. And that's probably why, honestly, the idea of building HR capability is an evergreen concept. It's been around for a while because it's just so hard to do.
Yeah. It's ever evolving too. When we think about the talent and the capabilities to win, the conversation now becomes a combination of human and agentic, or human and AGI, right? Talent and capabilities goes synthetic and goes human. It builds this fascinating conversation.
Yeah. And I think a couple of things I've seen recently, there's so many good platitudes that we should put on coffee mugs or t-shirts or on LinkedIn, right? This is the last generation that will manage just a human workforce. Fair. Probably. But I guess we could say, is our SaaS system, is that also a tool? Is it my email a tool? I know it's not thinking for itself. However, we've used technology for a long time, and HR's job is not to deploy technology, it's to solve business problems. And so we have to continue to come back to that with our leaders and be like, hey, look, we're not putting technology in just because it's cool. We're actually, what business problem are we solving? And I think we will start to see more agentic AI, if you want, or agents, or whatever people want to say these are, because there's a lot of definitions that aren't very clear on that area. We'll start to see that more. But is that any different than, I don't know, how running a script in Workday? I'm much more optimistic about the future, but it does require HR leaders and all of us to step back and say, how do I create value? And the way I used to create value is no longer valid. And I have to find a new way to create value. And that is going to be challenging because that requires us to change more than the AI is going to change. And so some people will left behind because they can't adapt to it. But that's my thesis of where we go next.
Yeah. Love it. Love it.
JP, what is keeping you excited about this work right now?
For me, I feel incredibly blessed that I've had the support I've had, launching my own company, be able to build it and be able to keep the lights on and keep the kids fed and everything like that, and really help the industry. And when people say to me, hey, I love your podcast, it's made a difference, or the program that you put together has made a difference and you're doing good things for our field, that is incredibly valuable. So that keeps me excited. It keeps me working the 60 plus hours a week, probably closer to 70 a lot of times, actually. It's been pretty crazy. But that keeps me excited about going and trying to build a future that we can have big impact.
What's one piece of advice you'd give to a CHRO who's stepping into the role this year?
I'd say three things. I'm going to go blocking and tackling.
Okay.
Build and manage your relationships at the board and CEO and C-suite level. That is your number one job. Number two, learn that business cold, right? Get in there. Number three, deliver a win for that CEO in the first 90 days to get on their good side. And number four is figure out how AI is going to help you elevate and continue to get closer to that. That's for every HR leader, but those are the three things I think matter the most.
JP, We like to rapid round where you can respond with one word or a statement. Sometimes these go longer than that, and that's totally fine. But are you game? A little rapid round?
Let's do it.
Okay. It's 2030. What's work going to look like?
Oh, wow. 2030. Guess what? The work's going to look a lot the same. The world's not changing that much in 5 years. Sorry. It hasn't changed in a long time. We've been using an office for probably 50 years or so, and we still think that's really great technology. It's outdated, but we still use the office, right? And we're returning to work. So I think what will be the same is politics, power, return to office, and hybrid will still be a debate because that's the new performance management. What will be new, though, is I think there'll be more innovation happening. I think innovation in terms of AI, I think they'll have to really find more innovative workers. People will have an opportunity to do more and create more with AI that we haven't in the past. And so I think it's going to have creative uprising, if you will. I think there'll be a lot more gig workers. I think more and more people will go on their own, start their own companies, and provide service to other larger companies. So I think the ecosystem of work will shift a little bit that way. But 5 years, it's just not far enough out to predict. I don't know, maybe 15, 20 years, it could be radically different, but it's hard to say. 5 feels like it'll still be closer to today than the Jetsons.
Okay. It's fair. It's fair. So people don't need to run for the hills just yet with all the flashy headlines going on. All right. What's one thing about corporate culture you'd like to just see die already?
Oh, I'd love for us to get rid of pseudo productivity. The idea that my job is showing up on meetings, but not producing any work. Yeah, I think we need to get back to where like I'm responsible for delivering something, a real work product, instead of showing up on calls to talk about the work that we're not actually doing or responding to emails about the work that we're going to do. And that's really, this is a Cal Newport concept, but I think pseudo productivity is actually what holds back real productivity in organizations. And so unfortunately, it's a hard one to get rid of. Yeah. But I really wish we could get to that point because I think it could be pretty powerful if we're actually all delivering the work we expect and understand how we create value.
Yeah. Get rid of the meeting for the other meeting and then the debrief after the meeting. What do you think the greatest opportunity is that most organizations are missing out on right now?
I think it's more that individuals are missing out on a big opportunity. And that is your current job is the most overlooked career opportunity in the world. Most people, when they think about their next job and their career, they look externally. I want this new role. I want to go here. I want to be promoted. What they fail to see is they're actually in a company and have an opportunity and truly a laboratory for growth. You have relationships, you know the business, you have a role. And now the opportunity is to make and design a job that you love. And so go to your manager, go to your leaders and say, I see an opportunity to make a difference and make that difference and design and build the capabilities you want to build internally. We just too often look other places. The grass is not always greener. There's a huge opportunity to make a bigger difference where you're at.
Yeah. What music are you listening to right now?
I'm listening to The Weeknd. We're going to go to the Weeknd concert here in September. So that's been on the family playlist. So that's cool.
Okay. What are you reading? Audiobooks count, by the way.
The book I most recently have read is The Lean Product Playbook. And so been reading a lot more about product management recently and getting into that.
Okay. Who do you really admire?
Oh, man, that's a good one. I think about my dad a lot recently because I've been writing some posts about him. And for whatever reason, he's come back up. And so my dad is just someone who I've really thought a lot about. He passed when I was 30. So it's been many years since he's passed. But he's someone I admired for helping me to become who I am today and the impact he had on just who I am overall.
He was a gumball.
Yeah, we saw that.
Yeah. So that did pretty well on LinkedIn. Yeah. So he ran the gumball machine business.
Okay.
He was a really interesting and eclectic guy. He had a PhD in economics and had done in sales and actually was a pilot for an airline at one point, was in the Air Force, and then got into the gumball machine business. And he liked building the gumball machines and tinkering. And so he taught me how to locate gumball machines when I was 15 years old. And the conversation, the dad comment that he taught me back then was, I was like, I'm never going to be able to buy this truck. And I wanted to buy a truck at 15. So my dad said, look, you want this truck, we'll buy it for you, but you have to now pay us back. It was $4,000 at the time. And he said, pay us back and I'll teach you how to locate gum machines, but you have to pay the entire truck off to drive it. So my truck actually sat there for a year and a half while I drove a really bad truck that was like a beat up old work truck to go do and put these vending machines out. And I remember saying to him, like, I'm never going to make enough money. And I was like, how am I going to do this? And he basically was like, JP, you'll make money how we make money, which is one gumball at a time, which is one quarter at a time. And that was just a statement that he would say to me all the time. It was like probably a little bit over the top, but I got beat into my head around that. And so it just stuck with me, this idea of one gumball at a time.
I like it. What's a piece of advice that you've received that you wish everyone had?
In the age of everyone having opinions, including myself and all of us, I think number one is consider the source. So when you think about taking advice from somebody, have they done it? Have they been there? Have they sat in the seat? And so for me, I really want to know if I'm taking advice, you at least have been similar situation to my shoes. Too often, there's a lot of advice now that is almost pseudo advice that someone actually hasn't been in the seat. They don't know what it's like, and we're pontificating. But the reality is, it depends always matters on advice. So my best advice is just consider the source, be thoughtful, and think about how it really applies to you and whether or not that advice actually is relevant or not.
Yeah. I think that's sound, right? We talk about that all the time. Francesca and I were even saying, don't take criticism even from someone you wouldn't take advice from. And being in the seat is so critically important. There's a lot out there where people haven't experienced it at all.
Or haven't experienced it at the scale.
Right.
Yeah.
The criticism one's really good because someone could throw a dagger at us and give us feedback.
Yeah.
But really, does it matter? Is that really the feedback I should listen to? Is it going to be helpful for me or not? I think that's a good point, at least a good lens to put on, not just take every piece of feedback you get.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Where can people follow you, and where can they sign up for your program?
Thanks for asking. LinkedIn, of course, is probably where I think a lot of us spend our time. So LinkedIn, and then if you want to go to futureofhr.com, you can find out about my newsletter, the Next Gen HR Accelerator program, et cetera, and check out the podcast.
Thanks, JP. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you both.
This episode was produced, edited, and all things by us, myself, Mel Plett, and Francesca Ranieri. Our music is by Pink Zebra. And if you like this, please rate and subscribe. We'd really appreciate it. That helps keep us going.
Take care, friends.
Bye, friends.
Bye, friend.